The sun was lowering behind the tree line, but the heat hadn't left. It clung to everything: the bark, the air, the dark green leaves above the river. Insects slowed, but didn't stop. The cries of howler monkeys grew distant as the forest settled into its dusk rhythm, but the heat remained, thick, damp, humming. The jaguar watched the water. He was large, not the largest of his kind, but heavy with age and distance. His shoulders rolled with power that came not from speed, but from certainty. His fur, thick and golden, held the last glints of daylight. Black rosettes flexed with every breath. He crouched low near the riverbank. His ears twitched, adjusting not to prey, but to pattern. He listened to the water, not for fish or splashes, but for flow. This river moved slowly, but it always moved one way, from the hills to the floodplain, southward. Predictable. But now, something had shifted. The current was restless. Edges of driftwood turned oddly in the bends. Small whirlpools formed where none had been the day before. Even the frogs, usually loud near this hour, were quieter. The jaguar didn't react quickly. He waited, still as the trunk beside him. He was no stranger to water. He had crossed deeper rivers, stalked through marshes, hunted caimans and capybaras in blackwater lagoons. But this river was his boundary, a marker. One side was memory, the other was unknown. He moved down the bank. His paws found stone and root without sound. At the edge he paused, dipped his head, and drank, not out of thirst, but to taste. The water was warm, too warm for this time of day. He raised his head slowly, looked across. There was no sign of threat, no scent of other cats, no human trace. But the stillness of the opposite bank was unnatural. The vines didn't sway, the shadows didn't shift. He stepped forward, one paw into the water, then another. No hesitation, only calculation. His weight barely disturbed the surface. The muscles beneath his coat moved like submerged cables, controlling every placement, every ripple. The river should have pulled south, and it did at first. But as he moved deeper, the current bent. Not drastically, not like a tidal change, but subtly, like a force reluctant to touch him. The water slowed. Driftwood stopped. The warm surface rolled backward along his path. He kept walking, his eyes fixed on the far side. Each paw sank, then rose. The water rose to his chest. He swam only when necessary, powerful, silent strokes. And with every movement, the current shifted just slightly in his favor. By the time he reached the far bank, the river was still again. Behind him, the water settled, not as it was before, but as if it had watched him and adjusted. The soil on the far bank was different. Not just wetter, it smelled unfamiliar. The roots were older, deeper, the leaves underfoot were broader, some already half decayed from the heavy humidity that clung to this side of the forest. The air was richer with rot and resin. The jaguar stepped from the river and paused. His ears turned independently, scanning behind him and ahead. He took in the full shape of the place, not just trees and ground, but the balance of sound. It was quieter than it should have been. The cicadas were late, the frogs sparse. The forest felt wrong, but not immediately dangerous. He advanced. Each step was silent. His paws met leaf and mud with the same weight. He moved through vines with practiced ease, never brushing more than necessary. His tail followed low. His breathing remained deep but slow, the pace of a creature built for patient violence. He moved inland, following no path. The underbrush here was dense but not impassable. He expected scent markings, urine trails, clawed bark, signs of another male's territory. There were none. Not a single tree bore the scratch of a rival. No scat, no spray, no warning. For a jaguar, this was more concerning than confrontation. Empty forest meant two things. Either no jaguar lived here, or something worse had cleared them out. Still, he pressed on. He passed under the massive roots of a kapok tree, its base like open jaws. The scent of monkey passed faintly overhead, but no sound. No alarm calls, no movement in the canopy. This was a land without claim. But not without history. He found a half-eaten armadillo carcass. Old, crusted, not feline work. Birds hadn't touched it. Ants were gone, as if the death here had turned the soil wrong. He sniffed once, moved on. Then came the first sound. Not from above, from below. A low rustle in the brush ahead. Not large, not threatening. A rodent, maybe. But the jaguar froze, ears forward. The rustle stopped, then resumed, moving away. He followed. Not because he was hungry, because he needed to know what moved in this forest. The trail led him through a narrow pass where two fallen trees had locked together, creating a dark corridor. As he stepped through, he caught it. A faint scent, unlike any he'd known. It wasn't predator, not prey, not feline, not canine, not human. But something had passed here recently, something large, something that did not mark, did not claim, but had moved without fear and left the world quieter in its wake. He stood there for a long moment, ears wide, nose high, muscles tight but calm, then moved forward again. Whatever lived on this bank was not like him, and it was not afraid of anything. The sun was gone now. What little light filtered through the canopy was tinted violet and gray. Dusk in the rainforest wasn't gradual. It fell like a stone. One moment the leaves shimmered gold, and the next they were black silhouettes. The jaguar moved higher up the slope, not far from the river, but enough to see down between the trees. He passed a wide-ceilinged ceiba tree, tall, straight, its bark smooth in places where the rain had carved long channels. Its base flared outward like the skirt of a giant. Here, in any normal forest, a jaguar would leave his mark. This was the kind of tree they chose. Old, central, wide visibility. A pillar, a message board. He stepped to it, raised his nose, and sniffed the bark carefully, slowly. Nothing. No urine, no scratches, no scent residue. No other male had claimed this place. And still, the tree wasn't clean. It smelled like stone left in the rain too long. Like absence. Like time had passed over it without memory. The bark was worn, not scratched. Weathered, not marked. As if even the wind here had nothing to carry. The jaguar stepped forward and turned sideways to the tree. With two heavy swipes of his forepaws, he raked deep, parallel lines into the bark. Long and deliberate. He let his claws drag until wood split. Then he lifted his tail and sprayed, head turned, eyes alert. The scent hit the air and held. Sharp, oily, dominant. He stepped back to look at his work. But something shifted. The wind, not a gust. Just a shift in direction, subtle like the river earlier. But immediate. His scent should have carried downwind into the forest, spreading through the brush to reach the edges of his new perimeter. Instead, it folded upward, back toward the slope. He followed it with his eyes. The leaves up the hill weren't moving, but something had changed in the rhythm of the forest. Insects stopped. Cicadas paused mid-buzz. The usual layers of jungle sound had peeled away like bark. He wasn't alone. No footfalls, no rustle, nothing visual. But he knew. Something had heard him. He stood still, muscles relaxed but ready. He didn't run. Jaguars don't run from what they don't see. They wait, listen, smell. But the wind now carried nothing, not even his own scent. It was as if the forest had taken his mark, absorbed it, and said nothing back. He turned away from the tree. He wouldn't leave. Not yet. He had claimed it. That meant something, even if the forest refused to answer. But for the first time, he wondered if something else had already claimed it first. Not by scent, but by silence. He moved downhill, not quickly, not out of fear, but with the deliberate, silent confidence that only a jaguar possesses. His body coiled smoothly between vines and roots. Muscles loaded, then flowed. He didn't rush, but he no longer explored. He was verifying. He'd marked the tree, left his scent, declared territory. Now he wanted distance, to move outward, establish range, define edges. A good territory had borders, and he needed to know where this forest ended. The trail was faint but usable, a depression in the brush, maybe an old tapir path. long overgrown but walkable. He followed it north, angling away from the river, uphill through the thickest part of the undergrowth. Each step took him deeper into the unknown. Birds had gone quiet again. Frogs were fewer. The occasional rustle of a lizard or tree crab stopped short before completing a sound. The forest wasn't reacting to him. It was watching with him. He pressed on. A slope rose sharply to his left. Moss-covered rock, slick with runoff. The ground curved to the right, a shallow gully. He followed the gully, scenting the air regularly. Still nothing. Not even the normal layers of decay and growth. The deeper he went, the more wrong the forest felt. His body tensed. It was subtle. The change. Barely enough for a human to notice. But he felt it. The weight of the trees. The stillness of the soil. The moisture in the air clinging too tightly. And then, a break in the trees. He stepped out into a small clearing and stopped. Before him stood the same ceiba tree he had marked. Same bark, same parallel claw marks, same wet spot darkening the roots. He blinked once, lowered his head, sniffed the air. It was his, undeniably. But the trail had curved away, he was sure. His path had taken him in a loop, yes, but one that should have gone far from this tree. He had walked at least 20 minutes in a steady direction. Yet here he stood, back at the mark, as if drawn. He turned in a full circle. No path back looked familiar. No trail looked correct. Even his own scent trail, usually easy for him to follow, had faded, drowned under the smell of wet earth and something older. This wasn't his mistake. It was the forest's design. Not by accident, but intention. Something had guided his steps back to this point. Not with force, but with suggestion. The curves in the trail, the ease of the ground, the illusion of forward motion, all leading in a circle. He stood still for a long moment. Listened. Waited. Then growled. Low and deep. Not a challenge, but a warning. Not to another jaguar, but to whatever it was that knew how to bend a path. The first drop landed like a whisper. Then another. And another. But the jaguar didn't feel them. He stood beneath the ceiba tree once more. The same one he had marked. The same one the forest had led him back to. And tilted his head upward. The leaves above shimmered faintly, twitching under impact. The sound of rain was clear. A soft percussion spreading across the canopy. But his fur was dry. No scent of wetness in the air. No cooling of the soil. Just sound. He took a few steps forward, out from the tree's base. Still no drops on his back. He could hear them landing all around, a rhythm as familiar as breath in the jungle. But the rain was not here, or not touching him. The jaguar froze. His ears tracked it, a wide circle of rainfall all around, like a dome of sound. Every leaf responded, every fern bent. But his path, his immediate space, remained untouched. He opened his mouth slightly, tasting the air with the Jacobson's organ. There was water in the air, vapor, but not enough to match the sound and the smell. It lacked the usual electric tang of a true storm. This wasn't rain. It was the idea of rain. A copy. A signal. He stepped forward slowly toward a broad-leafed heliconia plant. The leaf shimmered under the weight of droplets. One fat bead rolled to the edge and fell. A clean, round drop that should have splashed. But it didn't. It hit the ground soundlessly, leaving no mark on the soil. He turned his head sharply. To his left, a movement. Not an animal. A shift in color, like something pulled back just before being seen. The undergrowth swayed, not from impact, but from absence. Something had been there. He didn't growl this time. He watched, ears pinned slightly, tail still. The false rain continued. The rhythm never faltered, but now he noticed it didn't change. No matter the surface, the sound was uniform. Leaves, bark, rock, all sounded the same under the fall. Rain didn't behave like that. This was designed. Not by the sky, but by something that wanted to mimic the forest. He backed into the cover of a low branch, his rosettes blending with the filtered shadow, not to hide, to anchor himself. The forest around him was now an echo of itself. Then, a true sound. A distant cough, low, feline, real. Not his voice. Another jaguar? He listened harder. It didn't repeat. The rain kept falling. But it wasn't rain. And this forest wasn't only forest. Night came fast. Not the soft night of stars and insects, but a thick, pressing dark that seemed to grow from the ground itself. The jaguar, long adapted to the hours when the sun gave no help, moved with certainty. But even he could feel it. This darkness was heavier. The rain sound persisted, still dry, still without consequence. But now it mixed with something else. A silence between the drops, a space where no animal moved, no leaf trembled. The forest was still alive, but it had turned inward. And then he saw them. Eyes, not glowing, not flickering like those of a coyote or deer, or even another cat. These eyes didn't shine, not even in the low light. They didn't reflect at all. They absorbed, set deep between two tree trunks, barely distinguishable from the shadow itself. The eyes held still, too still. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to flesh and breath, but to something else. Something that watches without blinking because it does not need to. The jaguar stopped mid-step. His paw hovered above the leaves, perfectly balanced. Muscles locked, breath low. He didn't growl, didn't challenge. Not out of fear, out of calculation. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't reacting like prey or predator. It wasn't afraid of him. It wasn't part of the hierarchy at all. And that made it dangerous. He shifted to the side, testing it. The eyes followed, exactly immediately. They didn't narrow, didn't widen. Just tracked, not curious, not hostile, observing. And something about them felt old. Not ancient in years, but old in purpose. Like they had been watching this place long before the river changed, long before the forest forgot how to echo. The jaguar took a slow breath. He lowered his paw, then stepped toward the eyes. Not fast, not in threat, just forward. The forest didn't react. The air didn't change. But the eyes, they didn't retreat. They held their position, and for a moment he felt as if he had stepped outside the pattern of things. Then they vanished. Not blinked, not turned. Gone. The space between the trees became just space again. The sound of the false rain faded. Not stopped, faded, like a memory dissolving mid-thought. The leaves stopped moving. The air warmed slightly. And now, the night was normal again. The jaguar stood still. He wasn't being followed. The presence was gone. But the memory of it remained, imprinted in the dark behind his eyes, where no light could touch. He turned slowly and began to walk back toward the river. Whatever lived here, whatever bent paths, silenced frogs and watched without blinking, had seen him. And for now that was enough. Dawn was near, but the light hadn't returned. Only a faint blue-gray glimmer hovered above the treetops, the kind of light that doesn't show the world, just reminds it that the sun still exists somewhere far away. The jaguar stood at the river's edge. He had retraced his steps, or tried to. The forest had not led him back directly. No trail matched what he remembered. Trees stood where they hadn't. Clearings were smaller or absent. Even the air tasted different. But somehow he had arrived. The river was no longer silent. It moved, gently, constantly, but not as before. Where once it had flowed in a single, predictable direction, now it pulsed, a strange, mirrored motion. The current divided at a center point, sending one stream downstream and the other up, against gravity, against logic. Two paths, both real, both impossible. He stepped close to the water, watched it carefully. Leaves floated toward him from both directions, meeting in the middle and spinning briefly before submerging. Bubbles rose and reversed. A stick drifted past, stopped, and was drawn backward. This river did not know which way to go, just like the forest behind him, which now felt like it was waiting, not watching, not threatening, waiting. He lowered his head and drank. The water was cold this time. Real. It stung the tongue slightly, the way it should in morning air. No illusion. No mimicry. But when he lifted his head, the sound behind him returned. A single step. A shift of something heavy. He turned. Fast. Silent. Nothing. No eyes, no shape. Just trees. But he knew it was there again. Not to stop him, not to follow. Just to remember. He looked at the forest. Not with fear, not with challenge, but with acknowledgement. Whatever lived there had let him leave. That mattered. He stepped into the water again. This time the current did not resist. It parted. One half moved with him, the other behind. He crossed slowly, eyes on the far shore, pause, careful, deliberate. When he reached the opposite bank, the one he had left yesterday, he stopped, turned once, and looked back. The river was still split, as if undecided, and the jungle beyond held its breath. Then, with no sound, no wind, no shift in light, the current folded into one direction again, and the forest, for the first time, let go.